Tai Tuivasa, guys. If you have Tai Tuivasa, I feel as though you have gold. In this regard, you can do anything you want with him. I think you could go look at that top 10 list. I think you could go more like 15. I'll make it 10 just so that it's simple. You could grab anybody at random and you could put Tuivasa in there with him. Now, that was questioned. That was questioned, including by people like me, who recognized the gains in skills, who recognized the absolute popularity of Tai, but questioned where he was at in terms of fundamentals, where he was at in terms of offense and defense. Did he actually have the skills? If you do martial arts, like a traditional belt system, Tai's not a black belt. But is he a brown? Is he a strong purple? Something along these lines. Now, that got called into question until Tai Tuivasa fought and almost beat Ciryl Gane. Now, all of a sudden you go, okay, even if he's a little bit unpolished in certain areas, he's damn good. He can compete with anybody. And to explain to you the phenomenon that is Tuivasa, it's very difficult for me to do in words. I've been in the arena on 4 separate occasions when he fought. 2 of those were in Las Vegas, but the other 2 were scattered around the world. Guys, it's unbelievable. You remember the movie Rocky. So Rocky's going to go fight the Russian. He goes to Russia to fight the Russian. And by the time the whole thing's done, right, they all get along. America and the Russians have all come together. But that's theatrical and that's in a movie. That's not going to be real life. Excuse me, it was. Tai Tuivasa walked into Houston to take on their favorite fighter, Derek Lewis. They were cheering Derek like mad when he went out there and they called for his name. Tai won the fight. The eruption of the crowd in a positive manner was louder for Tai post-fight when the match went the opposite way that the fans wanted. It was one of these real-life Rocky-esque moments. But now they're on their feet and they're drinking shoeies. I mean, it's this whole thing. I'm looking around going, this is one of the most fascinating sociological and psychological experiments that I've ever actually witnessed. Now, nobody cares because this is a sport and it has to do with knocking somebody out in a steel cage and drinking beer out of a dirty boot. I get that. There was still a social and a psychological element to this that was incredible. Tai is what we call over. He was a main event on ESPN, and I'm sitting here questioning if he's a strong purple or a low brown belt. Tell me anybody else that's ever been true about that could get to a main event. Tell me anybody else that's ever sold out an arena. Tell me anybody else that just fought the number 1 contender that wasn't a very clear and polished black belt. I mean, Tai Tuivasa is extremely unique. And if I was a promoter and I could get a hold of him, I realize he's not the world champion. I realize that. But I also realize that his contract, in absence of being a former world champion, is something fairly reasonable, and I have 8 or 9 or 10 different options I can do with him. Juxtapose that against Jon Jones. If you don't match Jon Jones up with the best guy, you are going to send somebody to the emergency room. If you put Jon Jones in there with the absolute best guy, many nights that guy has been in an ambulance. That's how he left the arena, right? I mean, you've got a real responsibility. That is how damn good Jon is, but I've seen athletes lose their career to success. Ronda Rousey would be a perfect example. She was paid so much and so much was expected of her. To honor that contract, you must headline her. You could not justify it in any other way. To put her in a headlining spot of a pay-per-view, you're going to put her against a champion. So now it's the absolute best. Whereas Ronda, when she left the sport, Ronda was still where people dream of getting. People dream their whole lives of getting to number 7 in the world, number 5 in the world, number 9 in the world. They dream of that. She was there. She could have kept fighting. She could have kept having fun. It would have had to be in a co-main event spot. Her contract wasn't set up that way. All of a sudden, you couldn't give her championship points. Well, now she doesn't want to do it as much, right? It was her own success that drove her from this sport as much as anything else. I hope that you understand that example. No part of that was an insult to Ronda. That was a reality of the way she was viewed, but the placement on the card that she had to be put in because of her own success. Jon has seen a lot of that. Now, we first had this discussion a year ago. From the time we've had that discussion till now, Tuivasa has competed 3 times and Jon has competed none. So we're now proving which should not ever be disputed. I mean, the words that I'm using should never be disputed. And if you think this is a typical Chael trying to give Jon the business session, that's not what it is. I'm trying to observe something. I would love to have been as good as Jon. If I'm coaching a guy or something, I would love for him to be as skilled as Jon. I would love for the guy to be as popular and as multi-versatile and have as many big fights in front of him as Tai does. And Tai, right now, and for a period of time, has had more massive fights. Jon Jones, for the last 4 fights of his career, never sold out an arena. In 4 fights, the guy's only fighting twice a year. And we're taking a considerable amount of time. There wasn't one single sold-out arena. Now, some of those fights turned out to be awesome. Santos was an awesome fight. Reyes was an incredible fight, but we didn't expect that going in. Going in, we had absolutely no anticipation. Nobody couldn't be at their television set, so they were locked on their phone refreshing the play-by-play when Jon Jones fought. Nobody was dying to ask a friend, who won? Is it over? Who won the fight? Well, yeah, Jon won the fight. I know Jon's going to win. Jon, it was one of those things where your own success starts to harm you just a little bit. When I come out and I tell you guys a topic, I know who's going to flop. I'll give you a great example, guys. But when Glover and Prohaska, the single greatest fight the light heavyweight division has ever seen, when that was done and it didn't get remade, we tried to get it made over here. We did our part to say the number one contender is supposed to be the guy who can or has beaten everybody else, and there's only one question left. Can he beat the guy with the belt? That's it. That's what the number one contender is supposed to be. And Glover, who was ahead mathematically on all 3 judges' cards, just had to run the clock out another 30 seconds. Certainly proved that he represented being the absolute best of everybody except maybe one guy. So we tried to get him the fight. And you guys weren't real loud about it. You weren't real vocal. You did say when it was time to speak that was a great fight. You did say when it was time to speak you'd love to see it again. You did say when it was time to speak that you would support the rematch, but he didn't get in front of it. And you didn't say that should happen before Blachowicz gets in there. And you didn't say that Lionheart and Uncle Liev shouldn't get their say. So now that fight is made. And you guys, I still can't get you to care. I just can't do it. There's nothing more that I can put on that. We're going to put the world championship on the line. There's nothing more in this sport that we can do. We've done it all. And not only could I still not get you guys to care, it's being rumored that the promotion itself is trying to bring in another fight over the top of that one and make that one a co-main event. So at this point, it's not a back and forth. I've had hypotheses before. I've brought them to you guys. I've observed them and studied them. That's not what this is. This is now fact. This is now an absolute. And it is a very tricky question. If you were the promoter and you could have one guy, now you're going to have to bring in the bells and whistles and do all the rest of the pieces, but I'll give you the contract. One of your contract means your bells and whistles better be damn straight, and one of them means you got a little bit of room for error. Would you rather have the contract or Tai Tuivasa? I'm doing a quick study over here, and I'm just curious. There's no wrong answer, and whatever the result is, including this blowing up in my face, I'll put it out and I'll live with it. But I am curious. I'm going to title this piece, Tai Tuivasa fans, click here. I'm then going to compare that exact same title for the Joneses fans to the Tuivasa fans, and I will see you all tomorrow with the update.